Hi, everyone. My name is Nick Jansma, and this is Lauren Nagel. We are going to be giving a talk called Perfect Strangers. It's a talk that we gave about a year ago, but we wanted to re-record and share. So I'm an engineering lead at Akamai, and Lauren and I had the opportunity to work together at a startup several years ago called Sosta, and then later at Akamai together after they acquired it. I think we've worked together in some capacity for about 6 years. We've diverged in our career paths since then. We're working at different companies at the moment. But even though we did that in the past, we enjoyed working with each other so much that we wanted to try to do a talk together about some of the things that we learned. Even though our roles are completely different. So I'm an engineer, Lauren is in product. The day-to-day tasks are different, our priorities and challenges are different. Over the time, we've had the opportunity to learn how to work together successfully, we think, how to support each other. And we also think the products that we work on were successful as a result. Lauren?
Yeah, so as Nick mentioned, I'm Lauren Nagel. I'm the Senior Director of Product Management at New Relic. And obviously, Nick and I are in software. We're not social scientists, but we do feel like we've built a great cross-functional relationship. And we wanted to talk today about how we did that. And also, we built a great friendship. And so we wanted to offer what we could learn, and hopefully you can replicate it and really, for yourself, get the gains of what happens when you do create those great cross-functional relationships.
So to set the stage for what we're going to talk about today, we're going to go through a sample scenario of two people working at the same company, but they're in different roles. And we're just going to kind of see how their interactions may affect each other. So let's say you're an engineer, Dwight in this case, in the picture above of Office, obviously, heads down, working on your latest release. You've been working on the project for months and you just don't have a lot of time left before the deadline. Your product manager, Jim, in this case, wants to chat. And the first thing that comes to your mind when he comes over and sits next to you is, oh man, what am I gonna have to change now? I don't have time for this. And sure enough, Jim informs you of some late-breaking changes and new requirements. And as a result, you're gonna have to throw away a lot of work and you probably don't have enough time to finish it before your deadline. Frustrating, right? These PMs, all they ever do is make you work or make work for you. You don't need the stress. But if we take a second and we step back and we think about what happened, why did PM's requirements change here? They don't come out of a vacuum, right? What you missed while you were focused on your own tasks is what may have instigated this change. Just a few minutes ago, leadership, Michael in this case, stopped by product's desk and laid down some new requirements after talking to one of your customers, for example. And now your PM has to take all of these new requirements and balance that against the rest of the team's priorities. So they're distinctly aware of how this will affect the schedule and cause work for engineering. They're also likely feeling the exact same thing you are: confusion, frustration, and stress. Nobody likes changes at the last moment, right? You or them. The thing is, we're all in this together. We have different roles and responsibilities, we have different priorities and demands put upon us, but we're all working towards a common goal. And so how can you gain empathy with your coworkers in these cross-functional roles so that you can work closer together and more efficiently?
So what we're going to cover today, that scenario is one example, but we all face common challenges. And that's one of the things that we really want to establish. And then there's 4 key pillars that Nick and I have identified from our relationship as a foundation of our working relationship and our friendship that we want to take you all through. And then talk through some of the day-to-day tactics and tools that we use to work through challenges on an everyday basis. So what are those challenges? Communication is a big one, and I'm going to actually dive into this a lot more deeply in a couple of slides, so I'm not going to hit on it too much now, but it's a huge one, right? How we all communicate with each other, how different audiences like to be communicated to and best absorb information really comes into play with cross-functional relationships. Personalities. Jim and Dwight have polar opposite personalities. So how do you work with people that maybe you wouldn't want to hang out with after work, outside of work, or maybe you don't have much in common with? We have different priorities and scopes of focus. So as Nick just walked through in the last scenario, different roles have different priorities. Some have management has to report to top level leadership and the board, and then engineering may have bug fixes or code deployment quality, automation that they have to write. So these conflicting priorities need to be resolved. You know, product is looking at the vision, finance is looking at numbers, engineering is like, what's in my Jira backlog? What have I signed up for this sprint? So understand that we all have different priorities and different sources of pressure that are coming down on us. We all have anxiety of change. So again, those different sources of the pressure coming in, those can also change in a moment. And you may not be aware of what's changed in your counterparts world or org. So I work in product, I get a lot of push down from upper level management. I try to buffer that for my team, and that gives me a lot of anxiety, right? An engineer might have gotten an urgent page that the site is coming down and they're trying to fix that, and that's giving them a lot of anxiety, or they're aware that maybe a change that you're asking is really risky and could bring on that anxiety for them. So we really need to be empathetic to each other. Change is hard for everyone. People don't instigate change unless they ultimately believe it's going to be long-term more positive than where you currently are. And then these challenges that come about from change really bring opportunity for impact and growth.
So Lawrence talked about some of the challenges that any two disciplines may have in working together. In this talk, we're going to try to build on, I guess, 4 pillars of success that we think can help make cross-functional teams' relationships successful. We'll talk about respect for each other's skill sets and career journeys. We'll talk about empathy for the challenges that each other may face. Trust, an important piece of any relationship, goes both ways, but it should begin by default. And finally, communication, to put all the pieces together. So the first pillar to talk about is respect. This is respect for each other's professions, skill sets, role in the company, and even where we are on our career path. Remember, not everybody is following the same path as you, right? Everyone's skills and role are there to complement what you're doing, and most importantly, what you are not able to do in your role. And it's not just about the act of respect. You also want to communicate it. You want to let them know that you value their work, their input, and their insight. We think it's best to try to start with a default level of respect for each other's, right? They are at the same job as you for a reason. They were hired for a reason. And they are valuable. They provide value in some way or another. And respect can be lost. That can always happen in any relationship. But if you at least start out by assuming that each other are competent, then we think it'll be easier to build upon that base layer later. Everyone just deserves respect out of the gate, unless they've given you an explicit reason not to have it. The next pillar of success is empathy. Empathy for what challenges the others may face. We all have the same goals, we shared and personal. We want the best for ourselves and for our families, and probably want to see our company be as successful as part of that. With these goals, we all have different pressure points, different things that cause us stress. For example, product has pressure from the business and from leadership and from customers. Engineering has pressures for meeting deadlines, quality code, and QA, wants to make sure that the release will be successful as well. We all come from different backgrounds with different family situations and the pressures that go along with it. And we want to release still impactful quality products. So how can we work together to relieve those pressure points? It's worthwhile to bring a little humanity into your relationship, right, with your coworkers, to try to understand what they're going through in their life, visible or invisible. Those details can easily get lost at work when you're focused on your product in the daily shuffle. But if you reach out and talk to them about what's actually going on, you can learn a lot, especially over the last year or two, right? With this pandemic and everything going on, we all have new shared stresses. We all have some pain probably. And so it's worthwhile to be empathetic with each other.
So trust, and what goes along with empathy and respect is then ultimately trust. And the same as with respect, you want to start out with that default of trust. You know that even if this is a brand new person to your organization, they went through an interview process, your colleagues have said they agree that this person is not only deserving of respect, but is trustworthy to do their job. And so if you start out with that default of trust, then when challenges arise, you can work through those challenges with them instead of, just taking stances on either side and kind of squaring off. So maybe they've missed deadlines, but back to that empathy, try to understand why. Is there something underlying? Is there something you can do to fix it going forward? And then build trust with each other by delivering on your promises. Have that dedication to work through those challenges and problems together. Take ownership and accountability for what's yours, and make sure that you also are asking others to take ownership and accountability of what they own as well. Remember that trust goes both ways. So you need to do what you promised to do so they trust you, and vice versa. And then this trust, while you want to start with that default, it is hard to really build that up deeply. And then it can be easily broken. So once you have that trust established, don't take it for granted and don't abuse it, because it's a lot harder to rebuild it. And then I said I was going to talk about communication again. So here's your deep dive on communication. And as a PM, this is one of my favorite topics because it is such a huge part of my role to communicate out to other people in my product management org, customers, the business, and then of course, engineering and sales, marketing, etc. So my style of communication is not a fit for everyone, especially not when I'm talking to engineers. And within that engineers, if it's an IC versus a manager, I need to change how I'm talking, and if I'm talking at 10,000 feet or 2 feet. And then what's also appropriate conversation for all those different levels. I change the tools I use to communicate. So for example, an executive usually wants something in an email with bullet points and very concise, or maybe a PowerPoint, or maybe, there's a customer spreadsheet that I need to communicate out. If I'm in finance, it's most definitely in a spreadsheet. But when I work with engineering, a lot of times they want everything just in a Slack or Jira, and they don't want to talk to me about it any more than that. So be conscious of the audience that you're speaking to, and that not everyone has that same communication style as you, and work towards that. Don't abandon who you are or be inauthentic. I'm not saying that. I show up as Lauren, whether I'm in Slack, Jira, a PowerPoint, or in person, right? But I do adapt to my audience so that my message comes across clearly and can be absorbed as much as possible, and to avoid miscommunication. And a big key to that is always using respectful tones, especially when you're just using textual forms of communication. But also when maybe things are getting a little heated. So understand when you're getting worked up and how that comes across. Take a moment, pause, recenter, gather yourself, and then move forward and lean back on those other pillars of communication, like the respect, the trust, and the empathy, to gather yourself in that pause moment and then take your communication forward back in that respectful tone. And this isn't an easy thing to do. Inevitably, challenges arise and we do have to work through them, and we don't always see eye to eye. And this is also where, if you have these established relationships with your cross-functional counterparts, they can actually help you out. So, I haven't always had the greatest conversations with other engineering leadership, but my relationship with Nick has really helped to work through those, because sometimes I can go back and he can help me see the other person's side, help me gain that empathy sometimes if I don't have that insight. And vice versa. Sometimes if Nick is having trouble talking to a customer and they just seem really demanding and they're throwing all these bugs at him, that can get really frustrating for him, especially as an engineering manager, and he's, feeling protective of his team and the work his team has done. I can come in there in those situations and a lot of times give him some understanding of why the customer is, pushing so hard on potentially a particular topic. So also, when you do get into those harder instances, with lean on the people that you've built those deeper relationships and friendships with.
So we think those were some of the key pillars to success, but how do we actually put them into practice? We're going to give you some tools that have worked for us together across other teams. So the first tool that we think is very important for any relationship is frequent one-on-ones. First thing first, start by talking. When you're meeting somebody new, when somebody is new on your team, or you have to build a relationship with somebody as part of a new role, one-on-ones or touch points are really a key building block to improving communication between the two of you. One-on-ones always have a range of topics, right? Working through problems and status updates, building rapport and stuff. And they can be awkward at first, especially if you're communicating with somebody for the first time, for example. But if you are able to schedule something on a regular basis, whether that's weekly or bi-weekly, even if it's just for 15 minutes, simply being forced to talk to each other once a week will eventually bear some familiarity. Over time, you may get to know the other person better, and hopefully that will help build trust and empathy. Ideally, you would do this not only with the people that you need to speak with for business purposes, but if you can reach outside of your daily bubble and see if other people in other roles would want to sync up and share what they're working on or share their challenges and problems, you can really learn a lot both about other people and other parts of the business.
So one of the really great things that can come out of having these cross-functional relationships is the ability to amplify and support each other's needs. So we each have individual goals that we can help each other with. So for instance, when engineering is overwhelmed, they can get support from product to reprioritize. So developers lean on product managers to make sure they're not drowning in work. And if they do feel like they're drowning in work, where should they focus? What task can I take away from Nick if his team is overloaded, which it usually is because they're a very popular team, that don't matter immediately. And maybe I can even just say, hey, don't even spend your brainwaves on that for 2 weeks, just focus on something else. So that can really help alleviate a lot of that pressure. And back to talking about kind of the pressures coming from different sources, we can also alleviate those pressures. When I am trying to figure out a roadmap or get back to a customer about timelines for things, I need estimates and technical feasibility guidance on what's actually possible. How long will things take? I've got a great new feature idea. Is it going to take 2 months or 2 years? So I really need to lean on engineering and their expertise to understand that. And engineering can spend time with me and share their knowledge so that I can also be more informed in making those decisions. Each role has, and in addition to this, each role has different channels of communication. So we can alleviate that pressure, but also if we're all feeling pressure, we have different, again, back to that communication, ways of communicating, but also channels, and we can reach more people and different people. So when we work together, we can both repeat the same message from different angles to leadership, and therefore create a more unified force and a stronger argument for our perspective. So Nick and I have worked with the same director of engineering in the past, and we've done this before where there's been a problem that's come up, and I've come at him from the business side and the product management side and the customer request and feature side, and Nick's been able to address it from the engineering side. And ultimately, we were able to kind of make some changes in how upper level management was making decisions, so that it actually created a better experience for our customers and a better experience for Nick and the engineering team. So use those communication skills specific to your role to actually help each other out. So again, more with the communication, Lauren. I know, but it's so important. So you want to make sure you're using the appropriate tools for communicating with each other. And this depends on the audience again, but especially right now in this remote environment that we've all been working in. And I know we've all adapted so amazingly, but that actually just kind of introduced more ways to communicate, I think, ultimately. So make sure you're choosing the right one, if that's Trello, Aha, Zoom, Jira, Slack, text messages directly, whatever it is. And then also make sure that when that conversation starts to go wonky, just take it to a call. Either pick up the phone, jump on a video call, and just talk through it. I think that's really underrated these days. And this also can come up specifically with communicating with engineering. I know a lot of my engineers would just prefer to get text, but text doesn't always communicate intent or tone, and a conversation can really go a long way. So again, lean on whatever people are most comfortable with, as long as it's really is allowing you to have that communication effectively. And then know when to switch tools. So if Slack isn't working, if that email thread is going in circles and taking too long to get responses, know when to take it to a live conversation. And then celebrate, yay. So one of the great things to communicate is success. And I think it really is on product often to communicate back to engineering their impact, to communicate that success. It's Friday, Nick and I are all about the party arms. And no one's successful alone, and one person's success, one role's success, one group's success is really everyone's success. So ensure that you have that feedback loop so that devs see the impact that they're having on customers. PMs know when issues are resolved. Marketing and sales know they can communicate out new releases and make sure customers are aware. So you really want to make sure that you're communicating that success and allowing for that celebration.
So let's summarize the tactics that we just talked about. We started with talking about doing frequent one-on-ones with the people that you work with and maybe some of the people that you don't work with every day. Don't talk about just the daily grind, talk about other things as well. You want to make sure that you support and amplify each other. We each have our own individual strengths and weaknesses, and we're all here as part of a team. You want to make sure to use the appropriate tools for the occasion and for the audience. And don't be afraid to switch based on who you're talking to. And then finally, absolutely celebrate the success. No one is successful alone. We're all part of a team again, and it's very important to make sure you take your wins when you can have them. So we touched on all the different tactics above. A lot of the anecdotes we shared here were from a lot of our shared experiences as product and engineers, but it's definitely applicable to other roles as well. You really will expand your horizon and may learn new things when you're talking to people in sales or marketing or QA. It's a repeatable formula, and we think we are all working towards a common goal. So take the risk and reach out and talk to other people. That's all. Wanted to thank everybody for watching today, and thank you, Lauren, for doing this with me.
Thank you, Nick. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.